Hi, I'm Vespera. At my father's funeral, my jealous brother pressed a loaded gun to my forehead and called me a traitor. He figured I'd vanish, like always. Then his commanding officer stormed over, snapped to attention, and saluted me. "General," he said. My brother's face went paper white. But the story doesn't begin with that trigger pull. It began the day my family mistook my silence for surrender, and the surprise waiting for them was far worse than they imagined. Before we dive in, what time are you listening, and where from? Tell me below. I read every comment. Thursday morning sunlight spilled over the white rows of headstones at Camp Nelson, glinting off brass shell casings the rifle squad had dropped during rehearsal. I stepped out of the rental car in a black sheath dress, my uniform still zipped in a garment bag on the back seat. The fabric felt thin against the cool Kentucky air, yet the real weight sat in my pocket. Dad's worn green epaulette, its frayed edge brushing my thumb like a pulse. I crossed the grass toward the viewing tent, heels sinking just enough to leave a trail any detective could follow. Two soldiers straightened as I passed. Neither seemed to recognize me without the stars. That was fine. I didn't come for applause. Inside the tent, the air tasted of carnations and axle grease from the honor guard's weapons. At the center, Dad's photo, him beaming beside me in my first set of captain's bars, was supposed to rest near the casket. Instead, I caught my sister Lacey sliding the frame into a cardboard box stamped MISC. She acted as if she were tidying a closet, not rewriting history. Heat climbed my neck, but I swallowed it down. "Morning, Lassie." She jumped, clutching the frame. "Mora, you're early." "Pays to catch flights that land." I nodded at the box. "Need a hand?" Her smile froze. "Family wants the display simpler. Less clutter." Clutter. Right. I let the word hang and moved on, refusing to give her the scene she clearly expected. Rows of folding chairs waited outside the tent, each tagged with crisp name cards. Mother Arliss, pale and controlled, guided relatives to their places like a maitre d' at a restaurant she no longer enjoyed. When she reached me, her gaze fixed on a point just past my shoulder. "There isn't a seat with your name," she said. "That's because the card's gone," I replied softly. She pressed her lips together, then directed an usher. "She'll stand in the back." My nephew Milo, 15, lanky, still smelling of teenage uncertainty, whispered, "Auntie, I thought you were overseas?" His eyes searched for my uniform, maybe for proof I was still someone to brag about in history class. "Just got stateside," I told him, squeezing his shoulder. "Stay warm." I positioned myself behind the last row as the funeral director approached, hat tucked under his arm like a confession. "General, ma'am, your brother manages the speaker list. Your eulogy was omitted." A dozen memories flashed. Dad coaching my 8-year-old pronunciation for the pledge, 12-year-old me promising I'd speak for the family someday, 22-year-old me yelling "incoming" while dragging a radio operator through Afghan dust. All that training, yet the hardest maneuver now was simply nodding. "Understood," I said. Across the clearing, the honor guard rehearsed the flag fold. Gannon strode over, dress blues perfect, jaw squared for the cameras already gathering. He greeted colonels, clapped a congressman's back, and skipped my outstretched gaze as though it were a pothole. Stopping at Dad's casket, he dusted medals that needed no polishing, then eyed my garment bag inside the car. "You always have to turn the spotlight," he muttered, low enough for only me. "I'm here for Dad, not lights." My voice held steady. I refused to let his grievance borrow my breath. He leaned closer. "Keep telling yourself that." I carried the epaulette to the side altar, laying it on Dad's Bible the way he once rested a soot-streaked hand on my helmet after a firefight, silent, proud, exhausted. My vow echoed inside. No one erases the man who taught me to lead. A lone bugle note pierced the scene as the musician tested his horn, slicing the hush like sheet metal. I spotted Gannon a few yards away, speaking with the cemetery security chief. Pointing at me? The chief's expression tightened. One hand drifted to the radio on his belt. And that was the moment I realized the ceremony was never meant to stay civil. The bugle's echo hadn't finished trembling through the trees when Gannon strode to the center of the honor guard like a man claiming stage rights. He threw up a hand, stopping the flag folding mid-crease. Rifles lowered, boots shuffled. Conversation died faster than a snapped radio signal. "She doesn't belong here," he declared, voice pitched to reach the last row of mourners. 30 sets of shoulders stiffened. The chaplain put his prayer book against his chest as if it might deflect whatever came next. Gannon pointed straight at me. "My sister betrayed this family, and she betrayed the nation that laid our father in this casket." A murmur rolled across the tent, half gasp, half embarrassed cough. My pulse thumped, but I kept my face still, hands clasped at my waist. Let him burn his own rope. He wasn't finished. "You paraded those stars on cable news and sold our last name for headlines. You're a disgrace." Betrayal. Headlines. Disgrace. He tossed the words like gravel, hoping one would chip something vital. I lifted my gaze to meet his. "Is that what you tell yourself at night?" I asked, calm as classroom chalk. A few veterans near the back exchanged quick glances. They recognized a controlled volley when they heard it. Mother stared at the grass. Lacey bit her lip, part of her wanting to intervene, the larger part relieved it wasn't her under the spotlight. Gannon's cheeks reddened. He reached for his ceremonial sidearm, the pistol intended to fire blanks for the rifle salute, and drew it with a motion too practiced. Metal flashed sunlight across Dad's polished coffin. Gasps spiraled outward. I heard a child whimper. The stiff click of safety catches on the honor guard's rifles, the sudden absence of birdsong. The muzzle fixed on my sternum. Time folded as tight as that unfinished flag. "You either walk away right now," Gannon hissed, "or I'll make sure this funeral's remembered for the right reasons." Lacey's whisper brushed my ear. "He's serious, Mora. Please, just go." "No," I answered her, eyes locked on my brother's. "I've already walked away too many times." We stood like that, siblings split by inches and a gun barrel, until a sharp bark cut through the paralysis. "Attention!" A decorated lieutenant colonel jogged from the perimeter, hat in hand, ribbons flashing. He halted beside me, heels striking together, and delivered a salute meant for parades, not tense standoffs. "General Hartwell," he announced, voice ringing off marble headstones. Conversation slammed into silence. Even the wind paused. Gannon's grip faltered. The pistol dipped as if the weight suddenly tripled. Color drained from his face. For a moment he looked 14 again, caught breaking Dad's compass. "Sir," I replied, returning the salute with 2 steady fingers. The lieutenant colonel pivoted toward the rifle squad, ordered them to stand fast, then faced my brother. "Captain Hartwell, holster your weapon." Gannon swallowed but obeyed. 2 military police officers moved in, gently but firmly guiding him away from the casket. No cuffs, yet. The ceremony wasn't over, but every witness knew his future had just been rerouted. As he passed, a young soldier in the honor guard stepped forward, hand shaking only slightly, and offered me the folded flag he'd been cradling. "Ma'am," he whispered, "your father would be proud." I accepted the triangle of blue and stars, its fabric warm from sunlight and ceremony. Murmurs spread, that respectful, humming acknowledgement soldiers give when hierarchy reveals itself. My mother's eyes glistened, though she still could not make herself move toward me. When the honor guard resumed, the rifles cracked their salute in flawless 3-round volleys. Echoes rolled across the valley, but none reverberated louder than the single fact now cemented in every mourner's mind. The general in this family wasn't the son. It was the daughter holding her ground. The funeral director, pale, gestured me toward the podium, the very stand from which my remarks had been erased. I walked past rows of relatives who suddenly found their shoes intensely interesting. At the microphone, I let the hush settle, then drew a steady breath. "My name is General Mora Hartwell," I began, voice carrying beyond the canopy toward countless phones now raised in shaky hands. "And this is what my father never wanted you to forget." And that was the moment I realized, no matter how many eyes were watching, how many stripes were on their sleeves, or how many medals lined their chests, I had to speak. I stepped forward, my boots settling firm against the wooden platform, the flag still folded tightly in my arms. The silence was complete, not respectful, tense, like the air itself was listening, unsure of what I'd say. I didn't look at Gannon. I didn't need to. I wasn't just his daughter, I began, voice steady, though my chest tightened around every word. I was his soldier. No microphone static, no movement, just that single sentence slicing through the hush. I served beside men and women my father trained. I stood in the same sand, under the same sun, took the same risks he once did. When I was promoted, he didn't say congratulations. He said, "You've earned another stripe, not a pedestal. Now earn the respect that comes with it." That was my father, always demanding, always quiet, and always watching. Someone in the front row, an older veteran, lowered his head slowly in solemn agreement. I let the flag rest gently on the podium, one hand resting over the blue. He taught me how to walk into fire with clarity, not for the glory, not even for the cause, but because the soldier next to you deserves your steadiness. That's what he wanted his legacy to be: strength without cruelty, honor without noise, and a backbone that didn't bend for politics, nor family pressure. Still, I didn't say Gannon's name. I didn't mention the gun. I didn't have to. My father didn't raise a quiet daughter. He raised a warrior who just happened to be born female, and no matter who tries to erase that today, he knew the truth. The air shifted. Someone exhaled. A sniffle in the distance. My hand stayed firm over the flag. I nodded once and stepped down. Later, after most of the crowd dispersed and the honor guards had packed up their rifles, I walked slowly toward the memorial bench near the rows of trimmed hedges. I didn't want to sit. I just needed a place where the sky could see me breathe. That's where Lacey found me. She'd slipped off her heels, barefoot now on the grass, carrying her purse under one arm. She didn't speak right away, just looked down at the ground between us, then finally said, "I wasn't going to come find you, but I couldn't leave like that." I turned slightly. "You mean like how Gannon did at my promotion ceremony?" Her eyes flinched. I hadn't intended it to sound so bitter, but that memory, it still stung, like sunburn beneath a shirt. "Mora," she began, voice soft. "I'm sorry for whispering, but I really thought he was going to pull the trigger." I stared straight ahead. "I know, and I know you meant well. But you whispered because you're used to me backing down, walking away." Lacey stayed quiet for a moment, then nodded. "You're the strongest one, Mora. But sometimes, you scare us." I almost laughed. "Scare you? Because I followed Dad's footsteps instead of baking cookies?" She flinched again. "No, because you never come back. You leave, and you don't look back. You didn't come home after the last deployment. You didn't come to Thanksgiving. You sent a card when Aunt Trudy died. A card. Because Mom made it clear I wasn't welcome." Lacey hesitated. Then it came. "She did. She made us promise. Said you'd already chosen your path. Said you'd abandoned the family for a uniform." The words settled over us like a slow fog. I shook my head, not out of disbelief, but because I finally saw it for what it was. "It wasn't just Gannon," I murmured. "It was all of you." Lacey didn't deny it. I looked at her, really looked. At the slight crease above her brow, the years of quiet compliance settled into her shoulders. "You didn't betray me, Lacey," I said gently. "You just followed the same silence Mom taught us to obey." She nodded, tears forming. "I just wanted peace." "And you got it," I said quietly, "at the cost of pretending I was never part of this family." She reached out, but I stepped back, not in anger, just in clarity. We were no longer sisters on the same side. We hadn't been for a long time. Before I could say more, a man in dress uniform, older, dignified, his steps careful, approached from the walkway. A retired colonel, judging by the bars on his shoulder and the gentle nod of other passing veterans. "General Hartwell," he said respectfully, extending a small envelope. "Your father asked me to deliver this, said if things went wrong today, you'd need the truth." I took the envelope with both hands. Lacey lingered, but I didn't open it in front of her. She knew better than to ask. After she left, I sat on the edge of the stone bench and broke the wax seal with my thumbnail. The letter inside was handwritten, slanted but firm, no smudges. Dad's penmanship, unmistakable. "If you're reading this," it began, "then your brother let his demons win." I didn't cry. I just kept reading. I always knew the day would come when Gannon's resentment would overflow. I tried to discipline it out of him, tried to redirect it, but envy, it doesn't listen to orders. I swallowed hard. He believed this life belonged to him. That rank was birthright. But you earned everything, Maura. Don't ever let anyone stain that. The ink grew darker in parts, as if he'd pressed harder. I left instructions with Colonel Haynes to correct the records. Gannon was never officially discharged with honor. His final reprimand was sealed to preserve the family's name. I thought that was mercy. Now I see it was fuel. My breath caught in my throat. You are my only legacy worth protecting. I sat still for a long time. The trees swayed behind the rows of flags. The crowd was mostly gone now, save for a few older men quietly folding up chairs. I folded the letter, tucked it into my coat, and stood. In the distance, the cemetery stretched wide, orderly, quiet, with headstones like soldiers standing attention in every direction. He tried to erase me. I looked up at the horizon, clenched the letter in one hand, the flag under my arm, and whispered, "Then I think it's time I returned the favor." The officer across from me didn't speak for a while. He just studied my face. Then the envelope, the flag, and the photo, my father in uniform, the sun catching his last medal. I'd arranged everything on the desk in front of us like a puzzle, but the pieces didn't fit neatly. They bled. He leaned forward. "Let me get this straight, Colonel Hartwell. You're saying your brother aimed a firearm at you while you were in uniform, during a funeral?" I met his gaze. Loaded, pointed, directly at my head. The room stayed still for a beat. Then his voice changed, less polite, more procedural. "And you're a superior officer?" "Yes." He nodded once. The line had been crossed. This wasn't a sibling spat anymore. This was attempted violence against a superior on federal property in front of multiple witnesses. A court-martial offense. I watched him take notes, every word slow and careful. My hand, resting on the edge of the desk, didn't shake. But inside I felt something dark settle into place. Not fear, not sadness. Something colder, like truth setting its jaw. Hours later, I stood outside the building while the wind tugged gently at my uniform. I hadn't even realized the sun had shifted. Everything felt off balance, like time itself was pausing to hear what would happen next. The next morning, I was called back in. The forensics report sat on the officer's desk when I walked in. The way he looked at me told me what I needed to know before he said a word. "It was his own service weapon," he said quietly. "Loaded. Hollow point rounds. Not ceremonial. Not symbolic." My chest didn't rise for a full breath. He continued. "This wasn't an emotional outburst. This was premeditated." I sat down slowly. "So if I had moved wrong, if you hadn't stood still, kept your tone calm, not reached for the flag when you did, there might have been 2 caskets leaving that field." His words echoed louder than gunfire. I nodded once. "Then we need to move." By the time I returned to my base that afternoon, security had been notified. Surveillance footage from the funeral was already being compiled. Witnesses were being asked to file statements. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. 2 days later, Mom showed up. She wasn't expected, and she didn't look apologetic. I was in the base cafeteria, halfway through a paper cup of bitter coffee when I saw her. She didn't wave. She didn't even take off her coat. She just stood by the doorway until I noticed. We found a small conference room, empty. I didn't offer to sit, so she stood too. "You're really doing this?" she asked, arms crossed like I was 13 again and hadn't done the dishes. You saw what he did. I saw a grieving brother. I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my file folder and slid the printed photo toward her, the one taken seconds before the gun was drawn. My father's face in the background, the sidearm at my temple, the expression on Gannon's face, one of pure calculation. Her hand hovered over the photo, but she didn't pick it up. I knew, she said softly, about what he did on his last deployment. Your father made me promise not to tell you. My eyes narrowed. Tell me what? She looked away. He assaulted a junior officer overseas. It got buried. Barely. That's why he was forced into early retirement. I stared. And you didn't think I needed to know that when he started unraveling? He needed protection, she whispered. You never did. I stepped back, the air in the room turning sharp. She added, we didn't want to lose both of you. He was already spiraling. You were so strong. You always have been. I wasn't sure if that was supposed to be comfort. It landed like blame. By the end of the week, the paperwork had been filed. A military-issued restraining order. Gannon's access was revoked, and he was suspended pending tribunal. They confiscated his badge, his weapon, and access to his former network. But networks aren't always confined to base walls. That weekend, my inbox exploded. Hundreds of messages, threats, slurs, insults, some masked as concern, others full of venom. I clicked one video, then another, then another. A YouTube channel. Gannon's face, his voice. Family is everything, but when you're betrayed by your own blood, when ambition turns a sister into a snake, what do? Clips from the funeral, twisted out of context. Female officer disrespects grieving brother at solemn ceremony. My jaw clenched. He had an audience, and they believed every word. One message read, "You're disgusting. You should have been the one in the casket." Another, "God sees what you did. Gannon is the real hero." I closed the screen and sat back, silence pressing in like a vice. Later that night, I was packing up documents when my phone buzzed with a private number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. A man's voice. Calm, almost cautious. "If you want the truth," he said, "check the storage unit listed under your father's name, the one on Ainsley Drive. There's something inside, something he left behind just for you." I didn't ask who he was. He hung up. At 3 a.m., I pulled up to the facility. The lock still bore my father's tag, his name in fading ink. The metal creaked as I rolled the door open, and what I saw inside shattered everything I thought I knew. I didn't wait for sunrise. By the time the security guard waved me through the gate, the moon was slipping behind a bank of low clouds, and the fluorescent bulbs along Ainsley Drive buzzed like tired hornets. Unit 17B sat at the end of the row, padlock flecked with rust, my father's handwriting still faintly visible on the tag. Hartwell. Pot. I slid the key home, breathed once, and lifted the door. Gray dust spiraled up, catching in the beam of my flashlight. Wooden crates, each stenciled with faded unit numbers, lined the back wall. Framed citations leaned together in a lopsided pile, and on a metal shelf, almost like an afterthought, rested a small fire safe and an old Sony camcorder sealed in a Ziploc bag. I pressed the playback button. The screen flickered. Dad sat at a workbench, uniform jacket draped over the chair behind him. His hair was thinner, cheeks hollowed by chemo, but his eyes, those steel blue eyes, were clear. "If you're watching this, kiddo," he said, voice low, "then Gannon crossed the line I hoped he'd never reach." I caught my breath. The flashlight trembled against my wrist. "He's been siphoning unit funds," Dad continued, "doctoring readiness reports, and last year..." He exhaled, heavy. "Last year he set up an op in Helmand purely to make you look incompetent, radioed bogus coordinates, blamed you for the delay, nearly cost 3 Marines their lives. Command buried it to avoid scandal, pinned that final medal on me to keep me quiet." The camera jolted as he leaned closer. "I took the disgrace because I thought I could fix him." A pause, raw. "Turns out you can't lead a man who won't follow." The tape ended there. No goodbye, no wisdom, just static. I opened the safe next. Inside lay a slim lockbox, 2 inches thick, stamped classified. Beneath it, another envelope addressed simply, "To Jag, deliver on breach." Dad's handwriting again. I slid the box and letter into my rucksack, then locked the unit and drove straight to base. Sunrise bleeding pink across the interstate. Coffee hadn't touched my lips, but adrenaline kept my hands steady. Colonel Ramirez met me outside her office. Her gaze flicked from the bag to my face. No small talk, we went straight to the conference table. I set the camcorder, the classified box, and Dad's sealed letter between us. "The firearm at the funeral was only the surface," I said. "Here's the rest." She watched the tape in silence, the room lit only by the screen's glow. When Dad's image vanished, she whispered, "That's a career grenade, for him and anyone who helped him." I opened the lockbox. Inside, the real after-action report from Helmand, redacted names restored in Dad's neat pen, plus bank statements showing the siphoned funds, and one faded photograph. Gannon shaking hands with an arms contractor he was never cleared to meet. Ramirez exhaled. "You know this could drag half a brigade into tribunal." I looked her dead on. "Then let it burn." Word traveled fast. By noon, Gannon's suspension was upgraded to pre-trial confinement, though the cuffs hadn't clicked yet. That's when the envelope slid under my office door. 2 photos of me walking my 8-year-old past the school gate, a typed note between them. "Drop the charges or this gets messy." Base security traced the printer code. Internal equipment, admin wing, one of Gannon's old drinking buddies. The circle was tightening. The threats online multiplied. "You're tearing a hero down. Fake general. Disgrace to the flag." His followers spliced funeral footage so it looked like I'd shoved him first. The algorithm did the rest. That evening, exhausted, I slung my bag over my shoulder and headed for the parking lot. Dusk painted the sky bruise purple. Near the exit, a black Charger idled, headlights off. I knew the license plate by heart. Gannon. He didn't gesture, didn't roll the window down, just stared, engine rumbling like a caged animal. I slowed, let him see I wasn't afraid, then kept walking to my truck. I drove home on side streets, checking mirrors every few blocks. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the neighborhood was silent. Porch lights glowing, sprinklers ticking in distant yards. I reset the alarm, fed the dog, and double-bolted the back door. Sometime after midnight, glass shattered downstairs. I grabbed the baseball bat from beneath my bed and crept to the hallway. Living room curtains billowed in the draft. Moonlight pooled on the coffee table, right where someone had placed a single object, Dad's folded flag. Only it wasn't mine. The field of blue was sliced down the center, stars cut out and scattered like confetti. That ragged flag should have kept me awake, but exhaustion finally dragged me under. 2 hours after I dozed off, the soft click of my front door jarred me upright. My bedroom clock glowed 2:17 a.m., too late for neighbors, too early for dawn. Heart hammering, I reached for the bat still propped against the dresser and padded down the hall. The house smelled of starch and metal. In the kitchen, moonlight spilled across the table, illuminating my father's Class A jacket. It had been cleaned and pressed so recently the creases looked carved in stone. Centered on the chest lay a single 9mm round, brass catching the light like a wink. There was no note, no fingerprint powder, nothing but the faint sway of the curtains someone forgot to close. I swept every room. No broken locks, no footprints on the hardwood. My son slept on, unaware. I sat outside his door until sunrise, the bullet chilling my palm. By 7, I was at the legal office on post, uniform sharp, coffee untouched. Captain Ellis, the JAG attorney assigned to protective cases, took one look at the jacket in my evidence bag and waved me to a seat. "You're sure the entry was clean?" "No forced lock," I said, sliding the round across his desk. Whoever came in had a key or knew how to stay quiet. He logged the item, then pulled up the whistleblower protocol. Within an hour, my file carried an emergency safeguard flag, extra patrols near my house, priority phone line to base security, temporary billet on post if I wanted it. I signed every form without blinking, the tribunal docket posted at noon. Somehow, Gannon called my mother before I even saw the schedule. My phone buzzed as I stepped out of Ellis's office. His voice message was only 8 seconds long, but I replayed it twice to be sure. "You're not the only Bundy who knows how to shoot. Courtroom or coffin, little sister? Pick one." I forwarded the clip to security, then silenced my phone. Fear is useful only if it keeps you moving. The afternoon brought rain, heavy and sudden. While thunder rolled, memories surfaced uninvited. 10 years earlier, in a muddy forward base mess tent, Dad announcing I'd be deputy commander on the next operation. Gannon's spoon clattered against his tray. Later that night, I found him alone in the latrine, face bloodied from punching the mirror until it shattered. Through cracked glass, he hissed, "I will never be second again." That was the last meal we shared as siblings. Lightning faded, resolve settled. I opened my old contacts list and dialed. Retired Colonel Swan answered on the second ring, voice gravelly from Texas dust. "If it's about your brother, I already booked a flight," he said before I spoke. "Your dad saved my platoon in '03. Time to settle the debt." Next I called Sergeant Nyland, the quiet tech who had patched comms the night Gannon sabotaged them. He'd left the service, but his voice carried the same steady rhythm. "Been waiting to testify, ma'am. Tell me when." By evening, a small but unbreakable wall of witnesses stood ready. I drove home under an amber sky. 2 blocks from the gate, I spotted the black Charger again, idling beneath a dead street lamp. The silhouette behind the wheel never moved, yet I felt the heat of his stare. I slowed enough for him to recognize my face, then turned into my driveway without showing fear. The house was silent, but tension vibrated in the walls. I double-checked windows, then sat at the kitchen table where the jacket had rested. My phone chimed, an email from base security confirming digital forensics. The tribunal notice had leaked through a clerk in personnel, one with a string of pro-Gannon posts on social media. He was already in custody. Near midnight, wind rattled the porch swing. I tried to read depositions, but every creak pulled my focus to the front door. At 11:58 p.m., a single knock, soft, deliberate. I peered through the peephole. No one stood outside. Only a shoebox sat on the doormat, rain beginning to speckle the cardboard. Inside, beneath a layer of tissue, lay my military ID. A red stamp slashed across my photograph. Cancelled. Dawn slipped under the blinds long before my mind caught up with the clock. I'd spent the night pacing past that cancelled ID, rehearsing answers to questions no one had asked yet. By 8:30, I was crossing the parade ground, dress blues crisp, heels punching frost-hardened asphalt. The legal clerk at the door scanned my badge, still active in their system, thank God, and waved me into the small wood-paneled courtroom. The place buzzed like a power line. Reporters, brass, enlisted aides perched on folding chairs along the back wall. When I reached the witness table, a flash of red hair in the front row twisted my stomach. Kellen Bundy. Our wayward cousin, drummed out of the Corps for selling night vision gear on eBay, now lounging in his suit coat like he'd bought a ticket to a prize fight. He lifted 2 fingers in a casual salute, sleeves riding up to reveal the cheap Liberty Bell tattoo he and Gannon got after their first weekend pass. My pulse kicked, but I kept my face glacier still. The bailiff called the room to order. I rose with the others while the 3-judge panel filed in, their silver stars gleaming beneath fluorescent lights. As soon as we were seated, the prosecution summoned Colonel Swan. He limped to the stand, legs stiff from Baghdad shrapnel, and unfolded a statement. His voice, slow and deliberate, outlined how mission logs from our 2016 deployment had been modified post-action by an officer other than the author. He read the file number. Everyone here knew it pointed to Gannon. Defense counsel pounced. "Colonel, is it possible the alteration was a clerical error made by, say, your subordinate, General Hartwell, while under mental strain after childbirth?" I didn't blink, though bile crept up my throat. Swan merely adjusted his glasses. "Sir, Maura gave birth 2 years after that mission. The timeline speaks for itself." Murmurs rippled. The judge rapped his gavel once. When my turn came, the defense tried the same tactic. General, records indicate you were treated for postpartum depression. Could that illness cloud your recollection? I leaned toward the mic, letting the pause stretch. Counselor, depression doesn't erase GPS data, radio chatter, or the fact my brother abandoned 2 wounded soldiers outside Fallujah. A gasp fluttered through the gallery. Kellen's grin vanished. We broke for coffee at 11. I stepped into the hallway to check messages and nearly dropped my phone. My checking account read 2 cents. Beneath that, an alert from Child Protective Services, anonymous claim of neglect, agent en route to interview my nanny. I felt the corridor tilt, but a Marine bailiff steadied my elbow. Ma'am, you might want to return. They're about to play something you'll want to hear. Inside, the lights dimmed. A technician placed a battered black recorder on the evidence cart. Static crackled, then my father's voice filled the room, strong though roughened by sandstorms and age. Alpha Team, hold position. In the background, Gannon argued, insisting he outranked the captain on sight, ordering a reckless advance. Then Dad again, lower, edged with sorrow. If anyone asks, this op never happened, and if my daughter tells anyone, she's done. The file ended with a pop like a spent shell casing. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. The lead judge cleared his throat, voice tight. We will recess until 0900 tomorrow. Court is adjourned. Gavels struck in unison. I gathered my notes, legs shivering with contained fury. As I headed for the aisle, Kellen rose, blocking my path. He smelled of cheap cologne and spite. Tomorrow you lose everything, he murmured, breath sour with peppermint schnapps. I sidestepped, brushing his shoulder harder than courtesy allowed, and kept walking. Outside, winter sun bounced off windshields, dazzling and cold. Near the flagpole stood Sergeant Nyland, hands clasped behind his back, waiting exactly where we'd agreed. He nodded once, our silent confirmation that the last witness, the medic Gannon left behind, had arrived on base and was ready to testify. Kellen's threat still rang in my ears when the doors opened again the next morning. I expected another hostile face, maybe one of Gannon's online followers. Instead, the bailiff stepped aside and my mother walked in, pale but resolute, clutching a slim file to her chest. For a beat, the whole courtroom forgot to breathe. I felt my nails press crescents into my palms. I hadn't spoken to her since the storage unit argument. She took the witness chair, straightened her skirt, and lifted her chin toward the bench. Your Honors, I asked to testify. Her voice shook, yet every vowel landed. Across the aisle, Gannon's jaw dropped open. Even his lawyer looked blindsided. The prosecutor nodded. Mrs. Bundy, state your full name for the record. Arliss Marion Hartwell Bundy. Her eyes flicked to me, wet but steady. I'm here to correct an omission, my own. From the folder, she pulled a yellowed envelope, Dad's handwriting unmistakable. Vespera received her letter, she said, using my given name. This one was for me. It was supposed to stay sealed unless your father feared Gannon had lost himself. The gallery leaned forward as she unfolded the brittle paper. If Gannon continues down this path, she read, voice cracking on the consonants, protect Vespera. She's the one who listens, the one who leads. Mom paused, swallowing. I ignored these words because admitting them meant choosing between my children. I chose silence, and I chose wrong. A rustle of whispers filled the room. Mom wiped her cheeks, then continued. Harlan, our cousin, sent me proof months ago, bank statements, falsified logbooks. I burned them. I hoped prayer would fix what discipline had not. She faced the judges, shoulders squared. I cannot burn the truth anymore. Defense counsel sprang up. Objection, hearsay, unverifiable. But the chief judge cut him off. The witness has produced original correspondence from Colonel Hartwell, deceased. Objection overruled. The gavel's crack sounded like a rifle report. Gannon erupted. She's lying. She always coddled her. He lunged, fingertips grazing the rail before 2 MPs pinned his arms. His spit speckled the polished floor while cameras clicked like cicadas. When the bailiff wrestled him toward the exit, he twisted enough to glare at Mom. You'll regret this, he rasped. She flinched, yet finished reading. When she stepped down, I rose without thinking. We met in the aisle. No embrace, only a gentle touch of her hand on my sleeve, as though asking permission to keep breathing. The panel recessed to deliberate. 23 minutes later, we were called back. Gannon, restrained between guards, stared at the ceiling. The presiding judge delivered the findings. All charges against me dismissed. A full Article 32 investigation into Captain Gannon Bundy, effective immediately. His pending promotion terminated, his carry privileges revoked. Each sentence felt like a weight lifted off my spine and set neatly on his. Court adjourned. No applause, just the thump of boots as officers stood and saluted. Not to the bench, to me. I returned the gesture, palm sharp, throat tight. Behind them, Mom wept silently into a handkerchief like a child at her first funeral. In the corridor, an aide intercepted me. General Hartwell, from Logistics Command. He handed over a small manila envelope. Inside lay a single photograph, Dad and me, 20 years younger, laughing beside a battered Humvee. Scrawled on the back in his slanted block letters, "Lead them right, baby girl." The fluorescent lights blurred. For years I'd marched under commands, citations, and threats, wondering if any path truly belonged to me. Now the message was clear and impossibly simple. Outside, thin winter sunlight burned off morning haze. Reporters gathered at the barricades, microphones poised, but I turned the other direction. Mom stood by the flagpole, waiting, no press in sight. I slipped the photo into my pocket and walked toward her, feeling the first real breath of purpose in a long, long while. I drove east at sunrise, the courthouse still a silhouette in my rearview mirror, Dad's photograph warm in my pocket. For the first time in years, I wasn't following orders or running from threats. I was moving toward something I'd chosen. 1 year later, on a humid June morning, I parked outside the Bethesda VA clinic. The building looked ordinary, red brick, trimmed hedges, but the air around it carried a hush I'd come to recognize, the quiet gravity of people trying to stitch themselves together. I sat on a weathered bench beneath a sweet gum tree and opened the day's mail. On top lay a cream envelope addressed to General Vespera Hartwell Bundy, U.S. Army, Ret. No return address, just a crisp military seal. Before reading, I looked up. A lieutenant, fresh out of West Point, passed, offered a precise salute, and kept walking. I returned the gesture, not out of reflex, but out of choice. The weight of those stars on my shoulders finally felt like mine. The letter inside wasn't official. It was handwritten, shaky in places. Vespera, I heard what you did for the women in Echo Flight. My daughter follows your leadership videos. Thank you. No signature, just an initial. Gratitude from a stranger, yet it steadied something inside me that no medal ever had. News had traveled differently for Gannon. Headlines last winter spelled it out in bold: disgraced captain, dishonorably discharged, federal grand jury index, Bundy brother for threats, document tampering. I hadn't celebrated, but I hadn't mourned either. Justice sometimes sounds like a gavel, other times it's simply the absence of footsteps behind you. That afternoon I drove to Silver Spring, to the beige assisted living residence where Mom now stayed. The nurse nodded me through to the courtyard. Mom sat near a fountain, cardigan draped over bony shoulders, eyes clearer than I'd expected. She patted the bench. Between us lay a small envelope, no seals, no military insignia. I wrote this after the tribunal, she whispered, passing it over. Her script was neat, practiced. I let fear make a coward of me. You were never the troublemaker. I was. I thought silence protected our family. All it protected was my comfort. I am sorry, and I love you. She didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't offer a speech. We simply watched Koi ripple the surface, letting the apology settle like silt until the water cleared. 3 weeks later, I reported for my new billet at Fort Meade, a leadership seminar for female non-commissioned officers. 10 recruits waited in the classroom, boots polished, notebooks ready. One raised her hand. "Ma'am, why didn't you quit when things got ugly?" I leaned against the lectern, remembering the bullet on Dad's uniform, the tribunal, the nights I'd checked on my sleeping son twice an hour. Because endurance isn't silent suffering, I said. It's surviving long enough to choose the right moment to speak, and speaking so the next woman doesn't have to wait as long. Heads nodded, pens scratched. In their faces I saw shards of my younger self, restless, uncertain, but unwilling to bow. On the first crisp day of October, I returned to Camp Nelson alone. Maple leaves burned red along the walk to Dad's grave. I knelt, placed his weather-worn silver star at the base of the headstone, and traced the carved letters with my thumb. "It's done, Dad," I murmured. "Rest easy." A gust lifted the edge of my jacket. Morning sunlight caught the silver threads of my shoulder boards, casting small starbursts across the granite. I turned to leave when a voice called from behind a row of headstones. "General Bundy? There's something you need to see." I pivoted, heart steady, ready. Whatever waited, I would meet it on my own terms.